Yes.
Okay. All right, I will go ahead and call the policy committee meeting for the Commission on Police Practices to order. It's 1:32 on October the 21st. And first, we'll just do a roll call. I'll just do it by who we have as attendees. Myself as chair. We have Charmaine, our interim executive director, Andrea Delbert-Griffin, Doug Case, Robin Spruce, and then we have with internal affairs, we have Captain Anthony Dupree, and then we have our executive assistant, Alina Conde. And I don't see any attendees, so I think we're good on that. So after roll call, approval of the minutes from the July 1st, 2021 meeting. Does anyone have any edits or revisions that they would like to make?
No.
I see a couple heads shaking no. So can I get a motion to approve?
I motion to approve.
Thank you. Can I get a second?
I second.
All right, so we have our motion by Andrea and a second by Robin. Charmaine, can you do a quick vote?
Sure. Commissioner Case,
Yes.
Commissioner Spruce,
Yes.
Commissioner Delbert-Griffin,
Yes.
and Chair Hilbert.
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right, so next item is non-agenda public comments. We don't have any attendees in this meeting. Did we receive any through the web link?
No public comment received.
Okay, perfect. For unfinished business, we have a couple items on here. I think they're going to be pretty quick. The first one is actually something that for this members of the public, it's something that we're tabling until the commission is fully implemented by the city council. And then we have budgets. That the purpose of that is basically to try to add third-party mediation. So instead of doing formal complaints, people can have kind of a third-party mediator to help kind of work with the complainant and the police department. But that's going to be tabled until we're fully implemented and funded. The next item, I don't believe we have any action on that. Something that Andrea had actually recommended, thank you, I should pull that up, had recommended was reviewing the homeless encampment sweep procedures. I know what we did is we looked at a couple different things. We reached out to San Diego Sheriff to see what they have. And then Andrea, I think you were also going to try to, you had a contact, I believe, you were going to try to reach out to them, but I don't know if you've had an opportunity to do that yet.
Not yet, but since it's
Okay.
coming up right now, I will do that today.
Okay. I was gonna say on this one, I think that I don't think we had any forward movement on our side. So we're gonna leave that as unfinished item. The other one, item number 3, we talked about in the last meeting. Patrick, who's also on this committee, had made some suggestions on making some changes to the discrimination and non-biased policing policies. And actually what I can do is I threw it into a Word doc. Let me try to share this real quick. And I started making, oh, Charmaine, I can't share until
You stop sharing.
unless you stop sharing. Okay. So the purpose here was trying to make a couple changes to the courtesy policy. It's 9.20, and also the non-biased policing policy is 9.31. So what I had done here is one of the things that we had, Patrick had recommended striking out that last sentence. And so I just basically try to do, let me move this over so I can actually see 2 screens. Of course, I just paused sharing. So what I was trying to do.
It looks like a part of your screen is showing. Okay.
All right, so do we see that Word doc again?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, perfect. So one of the things Patrick had recommended was removing the last sentence of our courtesy policy, that's 9.20, and replacing that with the non-biased policing policy. What I did here is I removed as a red line that last sentence. I wasn't quite sure, and you know, I know Patrick's not here to kind of talk about what his thought process was. I don't think he wanted to have the whole 9.31 included in there. So I figured we'd kind of open it up for conversation. The other 2 items we had was remove the reference to SDPD courtesy policy 9.20 from the non-biased policing policy, that's 9.31. I didn't make any changes there yet, but I think basically he's just kind of referring to more or less kind of that chunk there. And then I believe it was Doug I believe, had recommended adding regardless of the intent of the officer to the policy, and also to include the behavior of the officer. So I kind of want to open that up to the committee, and then I can kind of quickly type in any changes, then we can bring that to the full commission next week. So I guess with that, do we want to start with 9.20?
Yeah, I'm confused as to what's being proposed.
So Patrick had sent an email, and I could pull that up and share that as well, but we talked about this in the last meeting. Patrick, I think what he was getting at here was for that last sentence, I think he was kind of saying, that really isn't courtesy, I guess.
I
believe
think
is where he was.
so. I think I can clarify because it just came to me. The reason he wanted to remove that from courtesy is because those actions are actually discrimination. And so we didn't want potentially discriminatory acts being captured as only a courtesy violation. Does that make sense, Doug?
Mhm.
And so I
Yep.
think that's why
Yep.
he wanted that. He suggested, sort of like not he wanted, he suggested that be removed from the courtesy policy and live where it should live within discrimination.
Okay, and so is there a proposal to move that sentence to someplace else?
I think it already is. It's in 9.31.
That exact same language?
I think it's almost identical. We should read it.
Brandon, can you scroll up?
Yeah.
please?
Yeah, and I was gonna say, I think the member shall not make derogatory comments. I think the comments part may not be in there.
So I think the comment should be in if we take it out of there, I do think comment should be in the non-biased part.
I guess we could add comments. I was saying we could add it into this because this is the same, categories here.
Can you scroll down further? Are there specific things? So that's the
Pretty-
entirety of the,
It's pretty
Oh,
long.
yes.
There's a lot. And that's the entirety of the policy.
yeah, because it seems to focus on enforcement actions and it doesn't necessarily address the issue of comments.
And I think that's an ongoing, I think that's an ongoing concern. I think, I know that we've all observed that in our cases, is that it seems to be that the non-biased policing is solely targeting sort of that piece of, can you scroll down again? Because I'm missing the language and I want to say it right. So scroll down or up, I don't know, so I can see more of that. I don't know how to say it. Oh, enforcement action. So we'll not base the enforcement action. Our concern, and I know that Doug, you've brought this up as well, is that, and actually Andrea too, the interaction while they're being enforced, right? So it's not just, hey, I pulled you over because you're a Black, Indigenous person of color, right? It's during the interaction, there's also opportunity for discriminatory behavior. And so that's something else I think that you just brought up, Doug, that I do think that we want to think about how to address.
Yeah, so I'm wondering whether we ought to take the sentence that was removed, or we're proposing to have removed from courtesy, and put that sentence somewhere in the non-biased policing policy.
So maybe we just add it after this first paragraph. Because we also have, Patrick was suggesting removing the reference to 9.20. I personally don't necessarily think it's necessary to remove that. I think it still makes sense to say that, officers are still expected to maintain, professional, courteous relationships with members of the public. And I think the bias place policing piece, I think that's fine. And maybe what we just do is oh, that didn't work. Copy that again. Oh, that's why it's not doing it. All right, well, I will copy that. I'm thinking we take what I just have highlighted here, and we'll just add that here. And then, Doug, if I remember correctly, I think you wanted to add, I think that the term you had used was regardless of the intent of the officer. Where were you thinking we should add that to the non-biased policing policy? Do you remember?
I don't remember. Figure it out, but I don't remember. No, I know the rationale is that it's hard to well, the department won't sustain a discrimination complaint unless you show that the officer was intentionally doing it, which is in almost all cases impossible to prove. So
I'm thinking maybe we add it kind of to this middle paragraph here.
okay, scroll down.
Or maybe what we just do is we add it to the beginning here, is just say, regardless of the intent of the officer, members shall not base any enforcement action.
That's what I was thinking might make sense.
Yeah, or maybe go to the very beginning, because we're talking about, I mean, the policy isn't restricted to enforcement actions.
So then maybe we start it here, right before bias-based policing. And then Andrew,
Yep.
I see your hand up, so we'll get to you as soon as we're done with this piece here.
Sure.
Oops.
I'm not sure what the sentence structure that makes sense. Because regardless of the intent of the officer,
Well, but I think, and I know this was, I think, kind of your proposal, but I think I understand what you're trying to get at, but I was gonna say, I mean, it doesn't have to go there necessarily, but I was gonna say, if we're trying to say that regardless of knowing the intent of an officer, if they're doing something based upon their actions or behaviors, that creates the bias policing. That I think is what we're trying to have it encompass.
right? Exactly.
So maybe reverse the intent, actions, or
Right, because the thing is, I'm sorry, I just jumped ahead of Andrew.
yeah. Let me go to Andrea first, and then Robin, I can come back to you because I know Andrea's had her hand up for a bit.
Yeah. Brandon, I have a related question. Could you go down just a little bit in the document, or go down a little further to where the act is? Oh, there it is. So the Racial Profiling Act of 2015, or Profiling Identity Act, I think it's called. Is it correct to say that with every enforcement stop, or every time a police officer contacts a citizen for whatever reason, they are required to document the race, ethnicity, gender, etc., right? Do they do that based on what they perceive the person to be, or do they ask the person to self-identify?
I'll actually, I believe I know the correct answer, but I'll let Captain Dupree correct me if I'm wrong. I believe they make the judgment call based on what they see, unless they have information like their driver's license or they're collecting the field information form. But I mean, I believe, you know, if it's just like a detention and they let someone go, they might just report it based on what their appearance was, or what they assumed was to be that person's ethnic background or race. Captain, is that correct?
You're correct, unless they're
Okay.
specifically told otherwise by the person.
Okay. So I thought I was right, but I just want to make sure I'm not saying something that's not true. Okay, thank
Sure.
you.
Thank you.
Robin, and I think you had a point.
Well, it's back to us trying to frame that sentence
Okay.
at the top. So yeah, I'm just thinking, because I think what we're saying is the impact of officers' actions are discriminatory sometimes, even if they don't intend them to be. And so I think that that's what we're trying to get at, and framing that, I think, is where we're stuck, is what I think. I don't know if that's what you think, Doug, because I know it was your
Yeah,
regard.
it does. And I'm also not sure that we want regardless of intent, actions, or behavior.
Right, because it is action, it's behavior.
Right, yeah, yes, I don't think the actions and behavior goes in there. And so let me see, regardless of the intent of the officer, bias-based policing occurs when law enforcement inappropriately
That might work if you just leave the regardless of the intent. Keep reading the sentence.
inappropriately considers. But see, considers implies,
An enforcement action for pulling them over, and I think, are trying to get at that it can happen during the interaction too, once it's started.
yeah, I'm just wondering whether considers is the right word. Regardless of the intent of the
Exactly.
officer, bias-based policing occurs when law enforcement inappropriately
Utilizes, I guess, factors, but that's kind of the same thing.
yeah, I guess let's leave considers. I can't think of a better way of saying it. But does that accomplish what we want to say?
I think what we can also, sorry, go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Because what we're trying to get away from is, you know, if a officer does something that is offensive based on race, color, ethnicity, or whatever, but they didn't intend to be offensive, or they didn't intend to single out a particular group, but that was what the impact of their actions were. You know, saying that it's not discrimination because they didn't intend to to do that is what we want to avoid, and that's kind of what the department has. I mean, the legal counsel for the department won't sustain a discrimination complaint unless you can clearly show that it was the intent of the officer to discriminate. And since you don't know what is going on in the mind of an officer, that becomes very difficult to do. So in my opinion, you need to base it on objective, you know, on the behavior, not the intent.
I was going to say, what we could also do is, when this comes to the full commission, I'm sure there's going to be quite a bit of feedback and discussion on this, and I'm sure we'll wordsmith some of our recommendations there. Now, regardless of what we do, the department isn't just going to adopt our changes. They'll consider whatever we're recommending, and then they'll make the changes that they decide are appropriate. So they may not necessarily take our verbiage that we put in there, but we can make a proposal, which is kind of what I was thinking we would do as a policy committee when we pass it on to the full commission. So it sounds like we might be okay with this, and then we'll just discuss it at the open session next week. Is that kind of what I'm hearing from you, Doug?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. All right, so what I'll do,
No, and Patrick may want to weigh in on this too, and it'll give him a chance to do that.
What I'll do is I will, since I kind of redlined this piece out, it's not letting me copy it. So I will get that corrected and I will add this deleted section, which is part of what Patrick wanted to remove. And then I'll add it down here to 9.31. And then we'll include this in the agenda documents. And I will also forward this to Patrick so he can clarify or make any changes and we can bring it up to the full commission then. All right. Anything else on this one from anyone? Okay.
Yeah, I'm just, one other, sorry, I know.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
In decide, I'm just looking at the bottom, like the last, well, it's such a long sentence, but the second half of that first sentence, or this sentence we've been working on, lifestyle, structure, personal characteristics, in deciding with whom and how to intervene in an enforcement capacity, and how to, I almost want to say, and how to, maybe we can leave intervene, but and interact in an enforcement capacity.
Yeah, I like
So,
that.
with whom, comma, how to, and interact with, I mean, we'll have to get our connector set words there with whom and how to, with whom, comma, how to intervene, comma, and how, maybe we need the how again, or do we need the how? I don't know. But anyway, I want to interact in there somewhere.
So maybe you just,
Oh, yeah.
don't put a comma after intervene, just put how to intervene in and interact.
Yeah.
It'll probably be and or.
Yes, I like that, Charmaine.
Well, I'm sure we'll have some more edits when we come to our meeting next week. So I will keep this and we can kind of do the same thing when we have our open meeting.
Yeah, but you didn't, you have some extra words there. And how to intervene and or interact. You have how members, and so take out the how members. How to intervene and or interact with members of the, yeah, okay.
Looks good.
Okay. All right. Stop that one. The next one we have on the agenda for new business. The first time we have, it's a discussion for requiring officers that are involved in officer-involved shootings to undergo a psychological review before being returned to the field. That would, I believe, be most relevant to procedure 1.43. And let me share my screen and we can go over that again. Okay, so on this one, and again, all of these policies and procedures are on the police department's public website. So there's nothing here that's confidential. What I was from a high level thinking is, and this was updated a while ago, I think it was like 10 months ago. There's a section here that basically talks about, this section here says an officer involved will be relieved from all or relieved of all field duties and given other assignments within their command pending an investigation. The officer will remain in that status until notified by the officer of the chief of police to return to normal duty. I'm thinking we'd probably add something here, or maybe after H, we'd add a new I. I'm sure there's going to be some issues that come up with this. It's going to have to go to the union, and I'm sure there's going to be a meet and confer and all that kind of stuff. The rationale behind that is there have been some reports in the media, obviously, of officers who have said that their involvement in officer-involved shooting was causing them some issues. And I know the police department does have services available to officers to talk to, their kind of their EAP type programs, employee assistance plans. I don't believe any of that's required. I think basically once the investigation's over, as long as they say they're fine, an officer can go back. I personally think it would be a good recommendation for us to make to the police department that this needs to be kind of solidified into policy. I think it's important that if an officer is involved in an officer involved shooting, I think there needs to be some kind of, is everything okay? Are you, safe and able to go back to duty in a reasonable fashion? So that was kind of my idea here. I wanted to open it up to obviously the commission. Well, first the committee and then the commission to discuss. And then obviously, Captain Dupree, if you want to chime in on anything, we'd love to hear your opinion as well. That was just kind of my thought. We did have a case where the team said that they were going to bring it to policy committee. So we have brought it to policy committee for us to discuss. And with that, I will open it up to comments and feedback. If any.
So I like it. I'm trying to think of, you could just put the within their command, pending an investigation and determination of their, I'm not quite sure what the right adjective is, of their I'm thinking of mental fitness, but I'm not quite sure that's the right word, but it says, pending an investigation and a assessment of
I feel like Andrea might have a language here for us.
Yeah, so I'm actually, to be absolutely honest, I am not quite sure that I would recommend that at all, because I am thinking about what effects that may have if that is being asked. People don't generally voluntarily submit to mental health evaluations or assessments. I'm thinking of potential side effects that could ensue should this be asked of officers who were involved in the shooting. I'm thinking there may be tendencies to minimize what happened. I'm thinking that officers may develop some anxiety or fear around what it could mean if a psychologist finds whatever. What could that mean for their fitness for duty? And so I'm just more so thinking about sort of the unintended negative side effects that something like this could have. And also, I think if there is some sort of psychological consequence to being exposed to an officer involved shooting, I would suspect that this may not show for some time. Meaning it takes time for, people who have been exposed to trauma or traumatic situations. It may take time before that actually develops into something. So, which ultimately could also render the entire psychological assessment pointless if it's being done too soon, if that makes sense. So,
yeah, all those make sense. I'm wondering, maybe we could, is there a problem with requiring them to attend a session with somebody in their wellness division, so that the person in the wellness division, can alert them, see if there's any immediate issues, and also alert them to issues that may arrive down the road, and make them aware of the resources that are available if that happens.
yeah.
We don't want to punish an officer because they're suffering anxiety as a result of something that occurred on the job. But if we can, I don't know how many officers take advantage of that. I think that there probably is a sense that amongst the officers that we're strong, we don't need any psychological assessment. And so if it becomes part of the routine, prior to going back to duty, you meet with a representative from the wellness unit, and don't require an assessment, just require that they have that meeting, it might be a more appropriate way to proceed, because you're making very good points there.
And I think it's extremely valuable to educate people, officers, the general public on what sort of, how can this show in your body, in your thinking, what sort of could be the consequences, and how can you detect them, or how can you recognize them for what they are? And sort of providing that piece of education, I think, could be valuable, along with, of course, providing resources. Where can people get help if they need it? I think that's a good start.
Yeah, and then also going back to what I was saying before, there is, particularly in the policing culture, this macho,
Yeah.
I don't need any assistance type of thing. And if it is something that is part of the process that they're expected to go through, then it kind of avoids that, because it's something that they have to do. And so I think we would find much more, well, if it's required, everybody would be going through it, but it would, I don't know, that maybe the captain does know, how often those services are utilized when you have officer-involved shootings.
And he actually,
As
Captain Dupree actually has his hand up, so I'll let him chime in.
Yeah, kudos for me for finding that hand raise thing there. Yeah, we kind of already do some of the stuff that what Doug was saying. After an officer-involved shooting, there's a debrief, which includes our wellness and psychologists from Focus. I would suggest that, Brandon, maybe you meet with wellness to get an overview of what they provide. I know the meeting with Focus, we're not announcing that to, it's a private thing. And the way we do it is you go see Focus, and the department doesn't have to know you're going to see Focus, because we don't want people to worry about their career, to worry about being looked down upon for seeking help. So that's the way that's set up. And there are a lot of people that go see Focus, and we just get numbers. We don't get names. So there could be officers that are involved in officer-involved shootings that go see Focus as a result, but we don't get those results. And that's the way it's designed. But I would suggest you kind of talk to Focus to see how they set up those services after an officer-involved shooting, actually after any critical incidents on the department.
And so there's an automatic debriefing?
Usually there's an automatic debriefing. It usually happens the day after.
Okay.
All the folks involved in it, and having attended a couple of those myself, you kind of talk about your feelings, but again, you are offered other services where you can have one-on-one with someone, because you might not be comfortable in that environment with other people there to talk about how it's affecting you.
Okay, so there's somebody from, I'm not sure what the name of the department is, but I'll just call it what is the name of the department?
Wellness unit.
Okay, that I was correct. So there's somebody who is part of the wellness unit that is part of that debriefing. Is that always happen, or?
It's usually always happening after officer-involved shooting or a critical incident. It can be the death of a child, or a gruesome death that an officer may be on the scene of. They try to hold a debrief afterward.
If that's the case, then maybe we don't need to make a recommendation, because it sounds like it's already being done. And the concerns, I mean, I hear the concern, but we want to make sure that a person doesn't have PTSD or whatever, but for all the reasons that Andrea said, that would be hard to have a mandatory assessment, because then people would try to be deceptive in the assessment, or the symptoms may not show themselves for many more months. And so while I think the intent of the idea is maybe good, the unintended consequences would tend to outweigh that. And so if the department is already providing a mandatory debriefing that includes the wellness division, I think maybe we can just report that to the commission and see if that is satisfactory to the people. I'm not sure who it was that brought up this particular recommendation.
It was me, to be honest.
Okay.
It was that category 2 case that I reviewed and we presented 2 weeks ago.
So what, does that satisfy your concerns?
I get all of it. I think the idea is, I mean, and I think it goes also kind of to like what the military has to deal with. I think you oftentimes have people who don't want to acknowledge or admit that they need to talk to someone about it. But then if we're seeing issues that are coming up where people are clearly saying, I had this incident that happened and I was making poor choices based upon that. That was kind of what we were looking at is, you know, we're not saying obviously they need to be fired or anything even remotely close to that. We're basically just saying until something happened, what I was proposing was until you actually, you know, get like, yep, everything's good from, you know, some kind of psychology field, that I was thinking maybe it makes sense for that officer to not be working in the field. But I wanted to bring it up for discussion, so that's why we're talking about it. Robin, I see your hands up.
Yes. I want to echo what I'm hearing Andrea and Doug say. I think that's really, really important to think about, especially as you said, I certainly know from some that happens in the military, right? Is that folks don't present, especially those that are in really forward facing positions, don't report and don't go get help for those very reasons that Andrea was mentioning. I'm wondering if what section do you have up right now? Is this like Brandon, is this the list of things that are supposed to happen for the support the officer is supposed to get after this event? Like, what's the title of this?
No, this list here, it's kind of what happens when there's a shooting.
Okay, I'm just wondering if there's a way to, if it's not here already, which it may be because I'm not familiar with this particularly well, is to kind of codify what it sounds like Captain Dupree is saying is happening. If we could just like have that in here, right? Like that, yeah. So everyone gathers, we have a debrief, and the resources are offered to the officers involved so that they know what level of support they can get or whatever. I don't know if that's not in here. I'm wondering if that's what we could put in potentially as sort of a compromise position. And
Yeah,
go ahead. I'm sorry, Doug.
I didn't mean to interrupt. I'm just looking at what's on the screen, and it looks like number 8, the OIS peer support via the wellness unit and the on-call psychological services staff member.
Do what though? That's what I'm confused about. Like, where's this? So it's listed like what are they doing? Know what I mean? Like they shall contact the officer, or like where does it say? I know this is. I need to.
These are, I think, yeah. So basically, this is all the people
under
that
the
are
circumstances where the
immediately,
shooting was intentionally directed. Appropriate notifications. So people are notified. I don't know. Is it clear from here? And maybe it is to everybody. Is it clear from here that that officer is going to get those people to help him or her or them?
Well, can you go down? Is there anything that talks about the debriefing process? So, stop there for a second and see if it's.
Yeah, because this actually sounds a little punitive, right? Like only internal affairs officers, whichever is appropriate under the circumstances, will conduct an in-depth interview. I mean, that isn't like
right
psychological support. That's interrogation.
Yeah, you go down further.
Traumatic events looks like H maybe.
Yeah, well, it says officers involved in, I'm looking at in traumatic events such as shootings and custody deaths may need critical.
Yeah, I think that is maybe language that should be changed.
Critical incident debriefing. And then it says critical incident debriefing protocol. I guess there's a separate procedure that talks about the critical incident debriefing protocol.
Sorry, I'm talking muted. 5.21. Oh my God, I keep muting myself. Brandon, do you have access to 5.21?
I didn't save that PDF, but I can pull it up real quick. Just give me a second. So I think what we're probably doing is,
I've got it pulled up. It says that upon notification of a critical/traumatic incident, the watch commander's office will notify the on-duty wellness unit sergeant, who will assess the need for peer support. If needed, peer support will be dispatched to the appropriate location. And then it goes on to specify how psychological services will be notified, and so on and so forth. So I think this, I mean, we should look at it, but it may cover what we're trying to resolve.
yeah, it's not, it's 2 pages. It's significantly shorter than this one.
Whoever made the comment that maybe we ought to strengthen the language there from may need to something along,
That's what I said. Yeah.
shall participate in critical incident debriefing.
Well, the other one, because there's actually a couple different sections in there.
Well, I think the reason why it says may need is because the other procedure specifies in what instances critical incident debriefing will occur. And it sounds like it's not going to occur in all instances, depending on what the officer, right? How the officer presents and what the officer needs. And I think this is why it probably says may need.
And Brandon, if you look at the 5.21, it kind of addresses in C and D your concerns that you have mentioned about. I know some of you are trying to alluding to a mandatory critical debriefing. It kind of addresses that. It starts off a little bit about as needed, but it gives some responsibilities for the wellness unit and psychological services to do something, and almost seem like it's a mandatory critical debrief. So if you read C and D,
right,
and kind of E follow up, it kind of addresses what you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And I think E, touches base on the time intervals. I think to Andrew's point, it looks like they're going to follow up 1 week, 1 month, and 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
So I think what I'll just do then on this case is, it sounds like there's not really a lot of support to move forward on that. But what I'll also do is I will set up a meeting with Wellness. I've informally met with them several years ago, but I can specifically set up a meeting and talk about this, and then I can also kind of report back to the full committee next week about what is currently done, because I think also there's a lot that isn't known about how it's done. So I'll get some information and we'll just report back on that.
Yeah, I like that it says in D there, it says police personnel will be strongly encouraged by psychological services to schedule a confidential counseling appointment for individual debriefing. Because then it kind of makes it an expectation without making it a mandate. Because I'm not really sure that you can mandate a psychological counseling session, and if it is mandated, I'm not sure it would be effective.
All fair points. All right. So I guess we will table this, and I'll just report back on what we find to the committee, just so they know what we were doing on that one. Share the screen with the agenda again. And I think the other thing is, here we go. So the other item we had on here, and Robin, I believe this was your specific recommendation, so I'll let you kind of go into details on this, but this was specifically looking at making some changes to de-escalation, discussing how profane usage is sometimes used as a de-escalation tool. And so we wanted to talk about whether or not that's appropriate. So
yeah, and I think the short answer for me is certainly it's come up a couple of times in cases, not just from our team, but from a couple of others, that that officers have, it seems, I don't know if they've been trained or taught informally that using profane language can be a form of de-escalation, and that's not my understanding of how effective that would be. That said, I'm not an expert, and so I think it would be helpful probably to do some research, which I haven't done yet, and That's my first thought, is that I don't know. Certainly I know from an education perspective, it is not effective and is not trained. But I don't know that, those are different things, right? And so I'd be interested to know and happy to do some of the research myself about where to find more information about that.
Yeah, and just I just want to add for the members of the public that are going to watch this is there's essentially two ways an officer can use profanity. One is considered to be acceptable, the other one is not. So say, for example, there's a large crowd and an officer says something to the effect of "stay the F back." That is typically considered to be acceptable. That's kind of using your voice as authority to get people to get back from a crowd, or put your effing hands in the hair or something like that. That's usually considered to be somewhat okay. The other side that's not is if an officer were to use profanity against someone that's not necessary. For example, if an officer said you're an effing idiot or something like that, it's the same F word, it's just used in different ways. One is not appropriate and would most likely come back with a sustained finding. And the other one, depending on how it's used, might be exonerated, meaning it happened, the officer did use profanity, but it was acceptable and it was okay for policy. So just want to add that out there so members of the public that are watching can kind of understand the complexity. It is sometimes a little bit weird because you're using the same profane word, but it's kind of applied in a different way. So I guess, Robin, do you want to spearhead doing a little bit of research on that, and then we can bring this one back as well?
Absolutely. I would like to know, though, if there are places I should look specifically when you guys have been doing research on sort of police practices in general. So I'm not just Googling randomly. Tips and tricks?
Yeah, and what I can also do is, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I would go to Google Scholar and I would just see what keywords may generate what results, honestly.
And I was going to say, there's we've started about a month and a half ago, 2 months ago. I started reaching out to some of the other oversight groups throughout California. I could reach out to some of them as well to see if they've looked at this and what they're finding.
That'd be great.
The ones I've heard kind of the most from, it's LAPD and San Francisco PD, and those are probably equivalent to us in size and scope. So I'll reach out to them and see if they have any information on that, and I can share that with you.
Okay, and then I'll look at some peer-reviewed research, and then we'll come together.
Okay.
Yep.
So we will table that one as well. The last one, this is specifically kind of the officer's uniform policy. There was a complaint that came in, just to give some context to this. The complaint was basically alleging that we have officers that are, in this case, it was using Black Lives Matter logos and colors and things like that on their person, either as jewelry or as stickers or things like that being applied to their equipment. So this is a, yeah.
Hold on 1 second. It's not Black Lives Matter. It's the thin blue line.
Oh, sorry. Thank you. Thank you very much for that correction. That's a huge difference. But yeah, so that was kind of what sparked this up. That's a complaint that's going to be working through the process. The commission is going to review that. But it was a policy recommendation that we thought would be at least appropriate to bring forward to the policy committee. I don't know if we want to wait until that complaint works its way through and we actually get it to the commission and we can debate and discuss it, or if we wanted to try to start talking about that now. I did pull up that policy. I think I highlighted the section in here. It's quite, I won't say it's long. It's well, here, let me make it bigger for you guys. A lot of this is like how you wear your uniform, where your badge goes, things like that. And I believe it's towards the very end, it talks about things like jewelry. Like, for example, if you're wearing a religious necklace or something like that, what your requirements are. Oh, I thought I highlighted it. And then the other one is, and this is actually the uniform kind of PDF, but there's a comment that says bracelets other than medical identification types are not to be worn and rings should be kept to a minimum. I would say from my reading of the policy, it's kind of vague. It probably was not ever envisioned to encompass something like this, but there's the discussion and the question on whether or not it should be amended to kind of bring it up to date with current terms. So, I know, for example, officers can't have political statements or things like that on their uniforms when they're out in the field. But with that, I guess I'll open it up to the committee, and what do you guys want to do? Do you want to try to bring this forward now? Do you want to wait till that complaint works its way through to the commission? What are your thoughts?
What is the specific thing we're looking at?
This one here is, this is a huge document. It's the uniform specification manual. It was updated earlier this year.
I think, Doug, you're asking what the complaint is, right?
Yeah, Wayne, what was
Yeah.
what was the complaint wearing a face mask that had a political message on it, or?
This one, it wasn't necessarily a political message. It was the kind of blue lives matter. Blue line. Yeah. So it was, I believe the allegation was someone had a bracelet that had that logo on it. Another person had a ring that had the logo. I think there was another officer that had on their ammunition clips had like a sticker on the end of the kind of the blue line issue. So that was, I think, what kind of generated that complaint.
Yeah, well, on that issue, and I don't want to prejudge the complaint before we see it. The thin blue line interpretation has changed over time, and and the intent of its use previously was seen as a support for law enforcement. I mean, kind of analogous to police officers. It isn't the best analogy, but when they use black tape over their things when there has been an officer killing, it's been a sense of solidarity, maybe. I think with the Black Lives Matter movement, it became a us versus them type of thing of, Blue Lives Matter versus Black Lives Matter and so forth. And so what was previously a symbol of solidarity with law enforcement suddenly came to be viewed as a political message, which was very different than what I think its initial intent was. And I'm not sure we need to address that particular image in a policy, because usually policies are more general than that. But anyway, just, there ought to be there probably is something about anything that involves a political type of message, and defining political, broader than just, whether you're supporting a particular person for public office or whether you support a particular party, much broader than that. But because I don't want to prejudge that that case, but I think that we don't want officers to be wearing anything that could be offensive to certain members of the public.
So I think what I'm hearing there is let's hold off on this until that complaint comes to the commission, and then that team, if they see things that they want to recommend to policy or whatever, we can then address it at that point. Is that kind of the general consensus here? That's kind of what I think. I see Robin. Yep, everyone's shaking their heads. Okay. All right, well then we'll table that one until we get that complaint down. Does anyone have any future agenda items that you'd like to bring up for policy? I'll bring it up at the open session next week as well, if there's any policy recommendations people want to make.
Well, there were a couple that our team made in team issues and concerns. I'm not sure whether they ever made it on to a form, but one was a recommendation that all officers involved in executing a search warrant should have body-worn camera, regardless of whether or not they or an undercover agent. And so if they're a plainclothes officer, don't normally have a body worn camera. If they're going to be doing a search warrant, then they'd be required to have a body worn camera. And then the other one was a requirement that if someone takes a complaint in the field, a sergeant or a field lieutenant, that they ought to turn on their body worn camera to take the complaint. And I think,
Yeah, so I think,
but I don't think it's required in the body worn camera policy. It's listed as a valid reason for turning on body worn camera. But I think if somebody is making a complaint, we need to have the body worn camera footage of the complaint.
yeah, so I think we as a policy committee already voted on that. So that's
Okay,
actually going to be discussed at our open meeting on Tuesday. So I had a note in there was basically increasing body worn camera footage, plainclothes officers, but not undercover officers. Watch commander and field lieutenant should have them. And then I also have a note, field lieutenant should solicit a second BWC officer to assist and record if they don't have it. And then also any officer conducting a search must wear and utilize body cameras per standard policy. And I have a note in there that was passed on 7-1, and it was Nancy and Andrea, I think, were the vote. So I think those are the ones that you just
They are.
addressed. So we're going to be discussing that.
Go back that far. So
We're going to be, I'm going to have that on the agenda for next week. And then once the commission officially votes on that, we'll write the memo for the recommendations.
okay, I'd forgotten that we had done that. So sorry.
No worries. I was gonna say it's been a while since we've had the meeting. All right, well, if you guys don't have anything else, like I said, I will bring up the open session meeting next week if any other commissioners have policy recommendations and we can get those going. And otherwise, I don't have anything else and we can adjourn. Almost exactly 1 hour to the minute.
Thank you.
All right, guys.
Thanks,
everyone.
bye.